Welcome to episode 420 of Salcedo Paranormal. And tonight I am continuing and mostly finishing my review of Stephen King's Skeleton Crew, selected stories anyway. You can find all episodes of the show, along with links to social media and other ways to contact me, at the podcast page, and that is salcedoparanormal.podbean.com. That's SALSIDO paranormal.podbean.com. Always happy to hear from you all, whether you have comments or questions or topic suggestions or stories of paranormal experiences, whether they're your own or from others that you trust. Happy to either read those on the show or have you join me here as well to talk about them. And thank you all for listening to the show, whether you listen to the live streams or if you listen to the podcast or YouTube feeds, or if you listen on the Troubled Minds radio network, KUAP Digital Broadcasting. There you can hear replays of 2 episodes of my show every night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, right before Troubled Minds radio comes on. As always, I want to thank Michael Strange, host of Troubled Minds Radio, and Liam Martin, Rohan of the Exiled Minds podcast for producing the show and putting it up there and adding all the music that you hear when you listen on the station. So, really appreciate that. And if you'd like to support the show, there are a few different ways to do that. Again, I've already mentioned I am going to the Mid-Michigan Paracon in November 4th and 5th. So between that and then just equipment and research, there are costs to producing this show. So if you'd like to support the show, there's a few different ways to do that. Like I said, you can always share the show with others, rate and review it on your podcast platform of choice. Also, I've written some paranormal fiction and nonfiction books that you can check out on Amazon. Sorry if you can hear the sirens. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, I have a PayPal, Venmo, and a Patreon link. And coming soon to Patreon, either next month, so July, or I'm thinking August at the latest, there will be at least one extra episode of the show that will be Patreon only. It'll be a True Paranormal Stories from the Web episode of the show. I'm going to start with one. Might be able to do more eventually. We'll see. But it's just another way to support the show and get a little more content. So, anyway, I think that covers everything. So I have 3 more stories here to cover from this book. Again, Skeleton Crew by Stephen King. As of right now, the plan is to review the very first story from that book next Wednesday night with a friend of the show and frequent guest, Derek, the Night Stalker, and that's Stocker, because we're going to be reviewing The Mist, which is a story that takes place mostly, or for a large part of the story, in a grocery store. And so I thought it'd be fun to have him on to do that show. So, saving that story for last. So this is the end of sort of my own coverage of some of these stories here, but we're going to do that other story next week, unless plans change, which can happen. So, but with that, I think I can get to the stories here. And let's see. I just gotta find the. All right, there we go. So I have 3 stories here to share this, and we'll see how fast I can get through them. I might just let this be a longer show, just because it's 3 stories. So this first one is called The Reaper'S Image. And again, just to mention, all of these stories are Stephen King is a horror writer, so don't be surprised if some of these stories do not end well for the characters. I like to put that out there now because that's happened so many times. You never know with King how that's going to end up, whether the characters will be basically okay or not, or how that's going, especially with short stories, I think. But So this story is about an antique collector. Their last name is Spangler. I'll go with that. Who goes to this house that is basically a museum now. It's a large house, to buy the mirror that is well known for how it was crafted, and it's called the Delver's Mirror, which I'm wondering if that means. I don't think I saw it in the story. If they're referring to just the idea of it's so clear that you can delve into it, I'm curious about that now. But so Spangler goes to meet with the museum curator. Last name is Carlin, and so Carlin takes Spangler up to the basically the top of the building, to the attic, and gives Spangler a summary of the history of that mirror. So, and this is one of those objects that is supposedly possibly haunted or cursed, or however you want to call that. And it's several people have tried to destroy it over the years because of this. So Carlin explains the history of the mirror, mentioning all the people that have looked into it and seen this image of, again, the Grim Reaper, the hooded figure, skeletal figure with a sometimes with a scythe, a blade, and it's supposed to be there for sort of the aspect of death, or angel of death, or however, there's different ways you can look at that. And of course, so Spangler is not interested in any of that. He is very much of the opinion that there is no such thing as the paranormal, and he believes that the image is either just a story made up by people or some other kind of logical explanation. And as the two men get closer to the mirror, Spangler starts to feel frightened, basically. And as he approaches, and he can't figure out why. And so Carlin and Spangler finally make it to the mirror, which is, again, at the top of this house. It's sort of hidden away on purpose because of its past. And so Spangler says that he basically reprimands Carlin because he says there's a mirror. There's a piece of duct tape in the corner of the mirror, and so Spangler's very upset, and so Carlin says there's no tape on that mirror. So, but Carlin says that what there is. I said that. And so Carlin says that Spangler is seeing the Reaper, basically at a distance, in the image of the mirror. And so Spangler puts his hand over the what he thinks is the duct tape, and there's nothing there. It's the surface of the mirror itself. So when Spangler looks back at the mirror after, again, having a heated exchange with Carlin, when he looks back at the mirror again, the supposed duct tape is gone. It's not there. So Carlin starts to talk about this high school boy who was on a tour with, I believe, a class, and mentioned seeing the Reaper in the mirror, and then basically he fled the house and was never seen again. So not only is this mirror, the reason that this mirror is said to be possibly cursed is the people that report seeing the Reaper in the image go missing after that. And so Spangler starts to feel sick and rushes out of the room, and Carolyn remains behind to wait for Spangler. And so, yeah, that's where the story ends. And so you don't really know now, does that mean Spangler is going to be the next one to disappear? So, really well done story as always with King, in my opinion anyway. And yeah, just very interesting story. And I mean, I've talked about mirrors so many times over the years in this last couple of years in the show and in other conversations with friends and everything. Even did a show with Michael Strange over on Trouble Minds about it at one time as well. So the way that they can reflect or absorb or energy possibly, and possibly maybe be portals of a kind or windows looking into other dimensions. And there's all kinds of paranormal experiences you can find if you look around online having to do with mirrors. So just a really neat story there. Really well done. And so I guess I can move on to the next story here. Let's see here. All right. So, okay, there we go. So this next story is called Gramma, Gramma. And this story, again, it's a horror story. So it starts off with, an 11-year-old boy named George. He's at home he's at his house in Castle Rock, with his family. His mom, Ruth, when they find out over the phone that George's older brother, 13-year-old brother, Buddy, his name is in the story, broke his ankle while playing baseball. And so Ruth, the mother, has to go into the city, 19 miles away, to pick up Buddy from the hospital. But someone has to stay at home to watch her own mom, her own mother. And this is, I don't think they give the first name here. So George, even though he doesn't want to, because she has always sort of frightened him, he volunteers to stay home because she is ill and everyone is pretty sure that she's nearing her end. So, and she's asleep when Ruth leaves. So, after Ruth leaves, George is sitting in the kitchen, doing his homework, I believe. But and he starts thinking about Grandma, as she's known to him, and remembers the first time that she came to the house. And he'd been 6 years old, and the older woman demanded that he come to her so that she could give him a hug, but something about her terrified him, and he cried a lot. And so he never actually, they never actually hugged. And Ruth promised Grandma that they would in time. So George is still waiting for his mom to return. I'll just say his mom, I'll just do that. And hours pass, and he starts thinking about other events in the past that start surfacing in his mind, memories of everything. He remembers overhearing his mother and her siblings talking, and they were begging her to take care of her. And the siblings apparently said, "You're the only one that can basically quiet her down." That's in quotation marks there. So eventually Ruth was forced to leave San Francisco and move to Castle Rock. Again, that's one of the major towns in the King fictional universe, multiverse, however you want to call it, where all kinds of strange things happen. And so she's forced to move to this area to take care of George's grandma. And so George remembers that many years ago, Grandma had been kicked out of the local church as well as dismissed from her position as a school teacher for owning particular books, strange books. And he remembers that someone had told him in the family, or had heard from the family, that she had been unable to have children for a long time. And and that's when she started to look into the books, apparently. And so it turns out that after she started looking into these books, that's when she started to have children, which were, of course, George's mom and Ruth and her siblings. So there's this implication of occult practices there. So George starts to hear a scraping sound on sheets, and on the sheets there, basically on covering Grandma, and he thinks that it's the sounds of Grandma slowly moving as she's asleep or waking up, possibly, scraping against the bed. And so he goes into the room to check on her and watches Grandma, who appears to be harmless, even though he's always had the sense that she's not. He watches her, and I lost my spot. Okay, there we go. So he's watching her. Her fingers move, just her fingers, and he has another memory of Grandma again, where she's uttering strange words one night, and the next day, other relatives would pass away, and so basically the idea there is that she somehow had them killed for various reasons, for probably going against her. So George's looks at his grandma again and realizes that she has passed away. Now this time, there's a storm that is starting to brew outside the house, and he tries to figure out if she really is dead and had passed on. And so he starts to he leaves the room and tries to prepare himself to make a phone call to the doctor to let him know. But at this time, this is back many years ago, and when he picks up the phone, there are people on the party line, which is an older way of the phone systems working, where several people shared the same line. So he basically couldn't use the phone at the time without interjecting, basically. So George decided to wait for his mom to come back home. And so let's see here. As he's standing at the phone, he realizes he hasn't. He feels like he should have covered his grandma with the sheet, sort of your stereotypical what you see in TV. I'm guessing is where the idea came from, and so he decides he has to do that, and so he goes back into the room and places the sheet over her head. And as he does that, of course, typical horror story here, her hand wraps around his wrist and holds it for a few seconds. So George breaks free and runs away from her, and so he's trying to figure out what could happen, trying to rationalize it. And as he's in the kitchen, in the next room, basically, he hears sounds from that room. Sounds like moaning, and then also as if Grandma was trying to get off the bed, or Grandma's body was trying to get off the bed. And then he hears her calling him to come back into the room again so that she can give him a hug. So this is basically a nightmare version of anyone's experience with a grandma. I mean, basically is what the story is turning into. So George runs away, runs to another room, and hears her chasing after him. And so he feels like even though she passed away somehow, she waited to do that until she was alone with him. So as he's running away, there's a phone call from one of his aunts, one of Ruth's sisters, one of Grandma's daughters, and he tries to explain to her what's going on. And his aunt tells him to basically say certain words, sort of a phrase, a magical phrase, to he has to say this to her to get her to stay back, basically. And it involves of course, part of the phrase is you have to lie down. And I don't know the name here they mentioned, so I won't go into that. But of course, to lie down. And so, but Grandma actually does reach him and wraps her arms around him and gives him a hug. So, and then he passes out, and he comes to an hour later or so, sitting at the kitchen table. And when his mom comes back, George runs over to her, explaining that Grandma had passed, and of course the phone had not been working because of the storm. It had actually been knocked out. Power had been knocked out, I believe, even because of the storm, which had gotten worse and worse during this whole event. And Ruth asks him if anything else happened, and George says no and goes off to his room. And the end of the story, it's implied that Grandma basically transferred her spirit into George, and so now he's basically he is her, and I see here, and he also somehow after that used a spell to kill to have his aunt, the one that called to save him, killed. So, and of course the story ends with George not George, but George in his bed gritting, and basically planning for his new life, his sort of second life. The spirit of the grandma basically is planning this for the second life in her grandson's body. So yeah, creepy story, creepy ending, very well done. And yeah, we're gonna go over time on this one here because it doesn't make sense to save one last story for another show. So getting back to these stories here, again, thank you all for listening, being here and listening, especially live. This last story I'm going to share in this episode is called The Reach, R-E-A-C-H. So, let's see here. Where is it? Okay. So, this story is about this island that separates us, or this island is off the coast of the mainland. I'm guessing in Maine. I don't remember now. Doesn't say right there. But I believe so. So, and this story centers around, funny enough, in a way, another older woman, but this one, in this case, is not not trying to possess anyone. Her first name is Stella, and she is the oldest resident of this island. It's actually called Goat Island, Goat. She's celebrated her 95th birthday with her family, and she's never crossed this body of water that separates the island from the mainland. And it's this stretch of water is known as the Reach. The title of the story. So she's never been across this for her entire life. In other words, she's always been on the island. But a lot of her family, of course, since then have. And they some of her great grandchildren one day asked her why she's never left the island, and she said she never saw any reason to go. So, and this makes her it gets her thinking about memories of the past and everything. And also let's see here. She the thing that she's not telling everyone is that she is pretty sure she has some kind of illness that is going to be basically it's some kind of cancer that she's known about. Apparently she's known about that she has this for many years but kept to herself. And she believes it's in its final stages. So, and she thinks this because at this point in the story, when it starts, she's starting to see the deceased residents of the island, including her husband that had passed away. And she starts seeing these apparitions who are sort of suggesting that she follow them and go with them to across to the mainland, across the Reach, which of course is very symbolic. You have these ghosts, whatever they may be, asking her to cross over to the other side, literally in the case of the waterway, and then figuratively as well. So she's just going about her daily life throughout most of the story. And she keeps on meeting more and more people, or seeing more and more people from the island, from over her 95 years of life. So of course there's many. She starts seeing more and more of these apparitions, and so at first she doesn't want to go. She tries to she argues with them, doesn't listen, and so but eventually she agrees. And she dresses in her sort of the warmest clothes possible. Gets all bundled up as you do when you're in a area where it's winter and it's colder. This was, again, I'm guessing in Maine. Either way, it's obviously in a part of the country further to the north. So the story, near the end of the story, Stella decides to head across this frozen expanse of the Reach to the mainland. So as she starts to walk, it starts to snow, and then the wind starts to blow as well, and it makes it hard for her to find her way, and she starts to become afraid of getting lost in the storm. But as she's walking, she comes across the woman that was her best friend, from years ago, who had passed on, as well as several other people who had passed on, again, from over time. And they start to guide her. And it's still a difficult walk. Her hat is blown off of her head, the one she's wearing, and her husband gives her his old hat. And so you have this physical object being held and being used by what seems to be a ghost of some kind. So, and she's surrounded by her friends and family, and of course they sing this sort of traditional song about the island, and she basically keeps on going, and she feels like she actually makes it to the mainland. And she is found there, but she by people in the area. But of course, she has passed. But when people find her, and when her son finds her, he notices that she is wearing her husband's hat, his father's hat. That he doesn't know how she was able to get it, and so he's pretty sure that the basically of what happened, of the spirits of the island sort of guiding her, and for some reason across this reach. So, but then there's the hat. So you have to wonder, was the hat the only physical thing that was in that crowd of all those people, or was there some kind of can some things from that spirit world, when you're transferring into it, be transferred back and forth? Again, you hear about people who have objects that disappear and reappear. Lots of possibilities there. So that's where that story ends. It's sort of it's an interesting story. Again, very well done. And yeah, so that's the last of those stories from that book. Other than the first one that I'll be covering in a future show with Derek. So really enjoyed the book. And again, there's other stories there that I didn't share that are more psychological, horror, and or suspense. And so definitely recommend you all check it out. That's going to do it for this episode of the show. Next time I will be doing the paranormal news show that I didn't get to do, and I'm actually going to be recording it right after I end this show. So thank you all for listening, and I will talk to you all on the next episode of Salcedo Paranormal. Take care.